Hello and welcome back to Quite Contrary Flower Farm. Today we're continuing our series about dahlia buying, and today we're going to look at some common problems, whether they're actually problems or not, whether you can do things yourself to fix them, and when and how to let the seller know if you think the tuber's not going to be viable anymore. The very first thing that we're going to talk about is the seller's obligations and responsibilities. Basically, the first thing that you're going to want to look at before buying any dahlias is the terms and conditions of sale. If you don't agree with them, don't buy from that seller. It's that simple. You'll find some of the really big box sellers will have things like guarantees on their tubers, and they'll give you your money back if you're not satisfied at all, or a replacement if they've got one available. Don't count on a replacement this year. I suspect everything's going to sell out really fast, and you'll only have a refund available to you. Some of the smaller growers will happily refund or replace, but you have to let them know as soon as the tuber arrives if there's any problems, because they can't be held responsible after that point. Between everyone's different climates, if you think the difference between Queensland and Tasmania, so different, and different knowledge about how things should be stored and the different methods that we all use to store them, it's just too much on the seller if they have to guarantee that that tuber is going to grow. The seller's ultimate responsibility is to get something to you that would be reasonably expected to grow. And what we mean by that is we want to have a tuber that has everything in the right place. So they all look different. We talked about this yesterday, but basically we want to have a beautiful firm body. Be very, don't squeeze it too hard. You really don't need to. Think of it like an avocado. Like, no one wants the still really unripe avocado that everyone's been squeezing so it's bruised to softness. Like, they can be quite delicate, so just a gentle squeeze. We know it's firm. We want the neck to be all intact, preferably no sort of flexibility or anything there. We'll talk about that as well, but neck intact, no breaks, no damage, and we ideally want to be able to see an eye sprouting. So I did put up a picture of this one yesterday. You can see all those little bumps there on the crown. That's where the sprouts will come from. So in an ideal world, every single tuber would look like this, but it's not always the case. So in saying that, what are your responsibilities as the buyer? And the number one is to get those tubers into your house and out of the package and inspected and stored as quickly as possible. So that means you don't want to leave them on your doorstep for several days. You don't want to put them in a hot car and leave them alone for several days. Don't leave them at the post office for longer than you have to. And it's not super dramatic. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not like a live plant that if it doesn't get daylight and water, it's just going to keel over. Most of the time when they've been packaged, they've been set up to last a fair amount of time. But to give it the best chance, we really want to have the best chance at getting a plant that is going to produce masses of flowers, and so we're going to look at best practice. And part of that is pick up your package, open it up, look at what's inside. Don't leave it in the living room unattended. Get onto it. And part of what your agreement with some of the sellers will be is that they want to hear within 24 hours of delivery if there's anything wrong, and after that they sort of wash their hands of responsibility, because, as I said, it's just too hard. There's just too many variables that they can't account for. So step one, get your package, open your package. You'll see that most of the time they've been packaged in either brown paper bags are pretty popular, or little plastic bags, and you'll find them with either shredded newspaper is really common, vermiculite, coir, anything that you would use to pack it, sawdust shavings, all that sort of stuff is totally normal, and it's really good. It's going to add a cushion around the tuber to protect it while it's in transit. And then you're going to want to inspect your tubers. So what we mean when we say inspect the tubers is have a look at them, and then you can even do a little checklist. Is it fine? Is it not fine? And we're going to go through some of those things now. So all the things that I look at whenever I buy tubers. The first thing you might notice about your tuber is that it is dirty. Some sellers will clean their tubers, some will not. I don't wash mine. I just find they store better. I said this yesterday. but some people wash them because it makes it easier to divide. Also, if you have quite a heavy clay soil, you don't want that to stay on the tubers after you dig them out because that can cause moisture problems. So some wash, some don't. If there's dirt, don't stress about it, totally normal, not a problem. The next thing that you might notice, and I don't have a photo of this because it doesn't just pop up, is that the tuber may be moldy. It's not pretty and it's not ideal, but also not necessarily a problem. So mold on its own won't harm a tuber. It is only a problem if it gets into the tuber and causes rot. Either way, you probably don't want it. So if you do, you don't want mold in your house, it's not good. But if you do have a moldy tuber, you can fix it. All you have to do, or what I do, is I dip the whole tuber with the mold into a disinfecting solution. My preference is 10% bleach because I know it does the job. You could also wipe it off with metho. I think some people are keen on more eucalyptus. Basically just pick one and give it a go. Once it comes out, I then tend to let it air dry for an hour or two. You don't want to leave it out forever. Air dry, and then I dust with an antifungal. I use sulfur. It just makes sure that that mold isn't going to come back. I know some people like cinnamon. Haven't tried it. Yeah, if you prefer cinnamon, give it a go. It's probably fine at this point if it hasn't caused rot. Now, if the tuber has caused some rot, you'll know this because it will feel soft. And as I said, I don't have a moldy tuber, but we will do a little bit of an example of what you can do. So what I would do is, usually, if the rot is up this end of the head where we would expect the eyes to be forming, that's a problem. Do let the seller know about that, absolutely. If it's down this end, we can fix that because we can cut it off. Tubers are like potatoes. This is where the sprout comes from. It's not going to sprout from this end. So whether you cut it here or here, it's going to be fine. And I will show you that right now. You will need your imagination. Okay, what we're going to do now, and this is going to require a little bit of imagination, is I'm going to show you what to do if your tuber is rotting a little bit and you want to stop the rot. So here's our tuber. I've coloured it in a little bit. So we're just going to pretend that that blue mark is where the rot is. So assuming you rinse it off first so that you can get a good assessment, you've given a bit of a squeeze, you know this is the problem. We're going to take a knife. I've got my gardening knife, and then all we do is we just do a clean cut to have a look and see then if we can still see more rot. Okay, so if we have a little look inside, you can see, oh no, we've still got our rot still blue there. So we're going to take a little bit more off. Again, with our knife, we want it to be sharp, we want it to be clean. You can also use secateurs for this if you really want to. The skin comes off, we have a look. Look, no more rot, just like a potato. And then all we would do is, I would dust this now in sulfur. That's some very old sulfur sitting around. So just a little dust. And then off we go. We're good now to store this one away. Yeah, that's about it. Okay, so we've dealt with what happens if you have mold. Before you do any remedies, make sure you take a photo so you have evidence, and you can send that off to the seller if you're unhappy or if you think that maybe the viability of the tuber is not right. It will still probably sprout, assuming that there's enough tuber left for it to be fine. So you probably will still get that variety, but just in case something goes wrong down the track, at least then you can go back to the seller and say, hey, I did let you know, I'd like my refund, please. So the next thing is you want to check for an eye on your tuber. Now, if you're brand new to dahlias, like I know a lot of you are, this guide is mostly for new dahlia growers. It can be really hard to see the eye on tubers sometimes. So I'll put up pictures of these as well. but sometimes they're not as obvious. This one has one just here. I'll do a picture because that's not really focusing. And this one, as I showed you before, has all the beautiful lumps and bumps. By the time most tubers are being sent out, it will be really obvious where the eye is. It'll be growing. You might even have like a proper actual little plant popping up. But if you cannot see an eye, you have a few options. So the first one is obviously take photos. You want to be really up close on that specific part, so you need to be able to identify where the neck is and where the tail is. Tubers will only sprout eyes on that crown. So that's the bit where the stem used to be. I bought tubers last year from someone and they actually put dots of colour where all the eyes were going to pop up. That was really handy to just point it out, but it's not really practical on a larger scale. But if you are considering selling your tubers and you think they've got eyes but they might be hard to see, do consider doing that for the people who are getting them. If you don't think it's got the eye though, I mean, you can ask in the Facebook group, but it's really hard to tell from a photo. So I would probably just send it straight to the seller. They can either tell you where they think it is, or you've just got that record that, hey, I don't think this has got the eye. It really should have an eye by the time it gets to you. But also sometimes tubers will sprout an eye. Sometimes they sort of disappear and come back again. So yes, don't immediately panic, but do absolutely tell the seller that you don't think it has the eye, and make sure you document it, take really good photos. The next thing is to check the neck of the tuber, and remember the neck is this part between the crown, where the eyes are, where the old bit of stalk will be, and the body, and the tail is here. Sometimes these are long like a rat tail, but this is the neck, the whole lot of that. If a neck is broken, that tuber is not going to grow. So immediately tell the seller. It's possible that it just got broken in transit. You know, in an ideal world, all the tubers that we send to others would look like this. Obviously pretty hard to break that neck, a very sturdy tuber. But the reality is that some varieties like to put out tubers that look like this. And you can see this is a long neck, it is a thin neck, and it is a easily broken neck. It's just one of those Dahlia things. So if it is broken though, if it looks like it's been cut, if it's really, really bendy, don't bend it too much, you know, be really gentle with them. But if you can see that it's just hanging about, okay, not the best example, but if you can see something like this that is clearly broken, you know, absolutely tell the seller. The next thing that often appears is a shriveled up tuber. Sometimes this is also, like, it'll be commonly referred to as a desiccated tuber. Just means the same thing, it's shriveled up, the moisture's leaving it. Happens when the tubers are a bit too dry. I've noticed a few people having issues this year with wood shaving storage. It is drawing the moisture out. If you store in wood shavings, it is recommended to spray a little bit of water, not much, a couple of squirts every few weeks, just to help those tubers retain their moisture. Don't overdo it, you'll end up with mold and rotting tubers. Fine balance. So, desiccated tuber, what does it look like? I have some here. These tubers have been stored outside under the gum trees, so not really the correct way to store them. They've just been left to the elements, and that's why they look like this. But you can see we have 3 sort of different levels of desiccation here. Some are very dry, this end super dry, this end still okay. What you'll want to do is gauge for yourself how desiccated you think it is, and something that can help you do that is actually by cutting through the tail of the tuber. If it has white flesh inside, it's probably going to be okay, it's going to sprout. If it is just a dried up husk or it is empty, there's probably no chance for it. Generally speaking though, we would prefer to have a slightly desiccated tuber than one that has been kept too wet, because Dahlias love to rot. And as I said, bit of desiccation, it's still going to be fine. So I'll just show you the ends of these, and I'll do photos as well. But you can see this one still looks like more or less like a normal tuber on the inside. This is going to be fine. This one looks more shriveled, way more shriveled. But if you look inside, you can see that it's still very white. So it should be okay. Compared to this one, and this is just shriveled up. It's dry, it's dead. There is no coming back for this tuber. So that's a bin or a compost is more to the point. So yes, if in doubt, again, photos, message the seller. Just to let you know, this can happen really fast. So there is every chance that these were sent by the seller looking perfect, and in transit, they've just shriveled. I've had some that I've left out for 12 hours on the bench in here in the greenhouse. It wasn't even a very hot day, and they just completely carked it. It was marshmallow. I was really sad about it, but you know, just be aware, it is something that happens. The next thing is my tuber is too small or too big. The size is weird. Dahlia tuber size does not matter. If it's really small, we usually say anything bigger than a AAA battery is going to be viable, and realistically people shouldn't be sending anything smaller than a AA battery just to be safe. But they can be, you know, itty bitty, and it's going to be fine. On the flip side, you know, you can end up with monster tubers. This isn't even a very big one. You can see this one is a bit desiccated, but you know, you can get really big tubers. What you really want is something in between. If it's too small, you can't do too much about it, obviously, but if it's too big, some people say that the big tubers are a little bit lazy getting going because they can survive. This is a food source for them, and they can survive off this food source for ages before having to put out roots, which just slows the plant down a little bit. If in doubt though, you can just cut it. No worries at all. Cut it half the size, whatever. Make sure you leave at least, you know, enough for it to get some good food going. And then it will be fine. Leave it for a couple of hours to heal over, and then you can just restore it or plant it out. If in doubt, don't have to worry about it. I mean, you can just plant it, see how it goes. If you're a first time grower, I wouldn't worry about it. If you've been growing for a little while or you have extra tubers, you can experiment and see if you can find any difference between the sizes of tubers and the sort of plants you end up with. So size doesn't matter. Not a bulb, it's a tuber, different thing. You're going to end up with the same plant. Now the next thing is my dahlia is a bit misshapen. Sometimes when we're lifting the dahlias, we will put a garden fork through one of the tubers. Just like you would cut the end off if you were making it smaller, it's fine. You can see these two. This one's missing a bit of a chunk out the side. This one's missing a bit off the end. So long as that neck is intact and it has an eye, it's still going to grow. So those are the most common problems that you'll be encountering. And as I said, most of them aren't problems. Most of the time the dahlia is probably still going to grow as well. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is a pretty important one, and it's about managing your own expectations for these dahlia tubers. It's important to remember that dahlias are living even when they're in, you know, the funny potato tuber form. That means that there is a certain amount of unpredictability. It also means that sometimes, unfortunately, things go wrong and it's no one's fault. So you would have noticed probably at the start where I said that the seller has to send you something that you would reasonably expect would grow. And so that means, as we said, firm, proper neck, eyes, gets to you in one piece, and in relatively good condition. From that point on, anything that happens, it's on you. Can be a little bit scary, but also just know that sometimes you can have the most perfect looking dahlia tuber this one is my favourite. I really keep coming back to it. But it is the one that is relatively small, very firm, great neck, clearly visible eyes. I think it has about 6 eyes on it. That tuber, there's every chance that even if it survives the storage process and then we plant it out, it may just not sprout. It just happens, or it may get eaten by pests, or it may rot as soon as we plant it out. Like, there's so many different things that can go wrong, and I'm not trying to discourage you at all. Generally speaking, dahlias are really easy to grow. The Victoria Dahlia Society is considering making this our motto. I just read in the newsletter. Dahlias are easy to grow, they want to grow, but that doesn't mean that things can't go wrong. All we can do is give them the best conditions we can and hope that they thrive. So just know that these dahlias that you're buying, there's a percentage of them that aren't going to do what you want them to do. So I expect from the dahlias that I buy, 10 to 20% are not going to thrive. So whether that means that the tuber arrives and it's broken, or it rots during storage, or it any other number of things that go wrong, 10 to 20% I expect to never see a flower on. It's just part of gardening. You can't guarantee things, unfortunately, because there's so many factors that are outside of your control. So all we can do is give things the best chance possible and then be kind to ourselves if it doesn't work out. So point of the story today was always make sure you know what the conditions of sale are before you buy a tuber. Make sure you know if you can get your money back or a replacement if something does go wrong. Make sure you know how quickly you're supposed to be messaging the seller if there is a problem. A lot of them are putting in that sort of very short notice period because, as I said, there's just so many variables after that. All they can do is get the product into your hands, then it's on you. But some of the big box stores do guarantee a certain amount of time or that it will flower. So just be aware, make sure you know what you're signing up for, make sure you're happy with it before you make the purchase, because afterwards, a bit late. So the reasons that you want to message the seller are if it is mouldy, if you can't see an eye, if the neck is broken or damaged, or if it's particularly desiccated. Yeah, that's about it. Don't panic. If you get one that's a little bit funky, don't panic. There's every chance it's going to be fine. And yeah, otherwise, there's always next year. And worst comes to worst, if you buy 5 and only 4 of them grow, well, that's 4 varieties that you have that you can maybe leverage to swap for someone to get the one you really do want next year. It'll all work out. And there's always new dahlia varieties coming on. Like, my wish list gets longer and longer and longer every year, and I'm sure everyone else's does too. So don't stress about it. At the end of the day, it's just a flower. It'll be okay. The others are going to be super beautiful as well. So if this has been helpful, I hope you will join us for the next part in this series, which will be looking at what on earth you do now that you've got those dahlias in front of you, you've inspected them, you've let the seller know if there's a problem, and now you have to put them somewhere until it's time to plant out, if you can't plant out. So that's tomorrow's deal, and please give us a like, a subscribe, a comment, follow us on Instagram or Facebook if you like. That just helps us to find more and more people. Tell a friend if they are thinking about getting into dahlias, that would be great. And always let me know if I've only made more questions for you. Let me know what they are. We can do a Q&A, we can do whatever. And I'm happy to make more videos and articles. If I don't know the answer, I can find someone who does, and we can have a chat to them about it too. So that's always an option. And I'll see you next time.